It's a new week, and welcome everyone back to Switchpoint, our Nintendo focused podcast series. This week, it's time to recap Pokemon, dive into the incredible third party support thus far for Switch 2 with Resident Evil Requiem, and we now apparently have an Indie World presentation on the horizon. So, without further ado, let's kick it off with the main event, which has to be the Pokemon Presents celebration last week.
Yes, I mean, it was a massive, massive occasion. There were quite a lot more announcements than I was expecting. Nothing too out of the loop aside from that last announcement, but it was still really exciting. And, even as someone who really isn't a huge Pokemon fan, I have to admit that there were even parts where I was like, you know what, this is kind of cool and makes me want to play a lot of these newer games that were revealed.
Yeah, there was a lot there for a lot of different people. I'm similar to you. I'm very disconnected from Pokemon as a franchise at this point. Nothing against it. I know obviously it's hard to say that you're not a fan of it because it's so popular. It's ridiculous. Biggest media franchise in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm not too much of a fan at this point of Pokemon, but you cannot deny its influence. And this was a pretty good presentation, all things considered. I feel like that there was a ton covered, and we can talk about that a bit later. In specific, but Pokopia, which comes out later this week, is the highest rated game of the year on Metacritic. So there's a lot to look forward to. It's kind of crazy, and it's the highest rated Pokemon game ever. So seems like there's a lot going on with Pokemon that's in the right direction at least, which is good to see because I do think that Pokemon had a rough time on Switch. I think that there were some good games that came out. A lot of people were big fans of Scarlet and Violet. I personally got Let's Go Pikachu, and I enjoyed that for what it was, being a remake. I got Sword, and I did not finish that game because I just did not like it at all, and I was like, I'm done with the franchise at this point, and I haven't gone back. But I do think at least we did get new Pokemon Snap. It does feel like that Pokemon as a franchise is really cementing itself on Switch at this point, and Switch 2 to really be, have these big impact entries that fans have been really waiting for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking for myself, when it comes to Pokemon Nintendo Switch, honestly, I think the only game that I really played was Legends Arceus, which I adored. I love that game. That is still, one of my favorite experiences that I had on that console. And some point I do want to go back to it, but there weren't really any Pokemon games that were like, I need to get this. I thought Legends E to A would be that for me, but I don't know, something about the style didn't really click the same way as Arceus. Same with Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield. I wasn't a fan of the region. I wasn't a fan of the style and the starters. They weren't really grabbing me. I wanted to get Snap. I just never really picked it up. But that is definitely one that I want to get at some point. And yeah, I think Pocopia's success really has me optimistic about the future of the franchise, as not only are we going to get some hopefully really good mainline entries, I hope Pocopia doing well with fans and critics, and hopefully in terms of sales, really pushes them to do a lot more spin-offs, because I think personally, even as a kid, I always thought the spin-offs had the most un like unharnessed potential for the series. That was my exposure. One of my first Pokemon games that I ever really played was Battle Revolution on the Wii, and I loved it, even though it was like kind of a mess. It still holds a special place in my heart. So having those kind of games where it brings back that stadium aspect, or more snap games, or even something like Mystery Dungeon and a little bit more experiences like that, I think would be great. And I'm hopeful about what comes next for the series for sure.
No, me too as well. I guess we might as well just start with Pokopia, because I do think that's an interesting game to really talk about, for being honest. So Pokopia it was an under the radar announcement per se, right? Pokopia comes out and it is almost like life sim type game, Pokemon style, where you play as a Ditto and you take a bunch of Pokemon abilities and rebuild a whole land, and you go and farm and stuff like that. It's very interactive, and all the Pokemon characters are there, which I feel like makes for the recipe for a great success. And it does seem like, at least based off reviews, that, you know, Koei Tecmo, Omega Force, and, Game Freak might have been able to do that. It scored really well. People were praising how in depth the game is. And I feel like that this is the kind of game, being a life sim type game, that many fans online and gamers play for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. I mean, this is the kind of game that can get people really hooked to the Switch and drive sales, to be honest. We've seen that with Animal Crossing back in COVID, and not saying that this is going to be the same effect by any means, but I do think that this is going to be a game that has a way bigger splash than most people expect it to.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you said, life simulators always have a place and an audience in, especially when it comes to Nintendo games, Animal Crossing being one example, and then of course you have Tomodachi Life on the horizon. So, as we have talked about multiple times, Pokemon is this unshakable franchise. It will always sell and it will always do well. And the fact that, we're getting a Pokemon life simulator is huge. And, even as someone who isn't really like the biggest life simulator fan, or of course a big Pokemon fan, I can't deny there is a certain charm to Pocopia and the concept of a Ditto trying to emulate a human, and the weird stretchy arms and their weird eyes. I think that's so cute. And I really like, because we got our most recent trailer in Pokemon Presents, and I really like the multiplayer aspects of it too. I think that the hide and seek modes and the building modes are also going to be a really big hit. And I could see a lot of people, streamers and even just families really getting into those features.
Agreed. And I'll be honest, like, I did not realize until a few weeks ago that this was a Switch 2 exclusive. I think for whatever reason, it kind of just went over my head that this is a, oh, like, you're not able to play this on the Switch. So it is what it is. I do actually think though that it does have game share. So I guess you can technically play it on the Switch, but it's not coming out on Switch, which I think says a lot for, pushing forward on development. Um, this is a game, again, like we just said, people are going to buy Switch 2 consoles for this game, right? Yes, there's going to be some factor for Gen 10 in there, but people are going to be buying consoles for this. So I'm very interested to see what is going on and kind of how this game is perceived. Reviews only tell you so much. Be very interested to kind of see this depth that people keep talking about. Maybe that's me just needing to do. I need to do more due diligence. Can't even speak. I need to do more due diligence and read more reviews and really get a good idea of, like, what content is there beyond just rebuilding and kind of life sim type stuff. But I believe people. I mean, these are people that review games and for the most part, do good, are good at that. So we'll have to see. But I think Pocopia being this good and being the highest rated game in franchise history, which I feel like people are not talking about enough, that's insane. That's really good for the future of Pokemon. It really is.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of hope. I'd be curious to see if as time goes on, we learn a little bit more as it launches. If this is a game you would see yourself picking up, because I know you're not a huge life simulator guy either. But I don't know, do you even feel yourself kind of interested in this concept, even as someone who is not really into Pokemon or life simulators?
Honestly, probably not. And that's mainly just because I'm not too big into life sims, but I will say this is the first Pokemon game in a long time that I really do see the appeal for.
Yeah.
I feel like oftentimes, the new games come out and it's the same thing over and over and over again. Like, this feels like a really stark shakeup to the Pokemon formula, and bringing in a new way to experience that world is a great thing. So I am very honestly pretty happy and excited to see this release because, I know you mentioned earlier spin-offs. Like, I want to see more new takes on Pokemon that are not the simple formula that everyone knows and that has just been repeated for 30 years or whatever. I want to continue to see evolutions on that and new spin-offs and new ways to experience that world, because that's what I think helps push and innovate in a franchise. So we'll have to see. I'd say I probably will not have interest in picking up Pocopia. It doesn't help that it's a game key card so strangely, but I
Yeah.
do think that at the end of the day, I'm very happy about this release. And that's coming from someone that really isn't that big of a Pokemon fan.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree. I mean, I might pick it up. We'll see. It depends on, because I've already got. I'm not a huge like. I like my relationship with life simulators is complicated. Some of them I do really like. I like the sort of like Sims s games. That's why I really enjoy Tomodachi Life. But I've never really been a fan of the farming stuff. Um, so while Tomodachi Life is absolutely super up my alley, I don't know if Pocopia is, but maybe if enough of my friends are hyping it up and talking about it, I'll give it a shot. But we'll have to see. And yeah, I completely agree. I would love to see Pokemon start to take that approach that a lot of other franchises are starting to do and outsource their IP a little bit more. Obviously, this is handled by Koei Tecmo, and I want to see some really off the wall ideas for the Pokemon series, especially when it comes to spinoff. I would love a. It's completely insane, but I think a Pokemon Metroidvania would be kind of cool. For example, I think there are so much potential with this series that is just waiting to be unlocked, and I'm curious to see if this is the generation and this is the console where Game Freak and Pokemon Company are like, let's just do something crazy that will really just blow people's mind.
I hope so. I mean, I this is the time, man. This is the time for innovation, and I think that this is a very unique situation to be in as the Pokemon Company. Having the biggest media franchise in the world and growing that is, it has its challenges. And I think the perfect way to push forward right now is exactly what you're saying. Try new things, really bring quality new entries in. Game Freak is only able to do, I mean, at one point, a game a year, which is crazy. I'm actually really glad, which we'll talk about in a bit, that Winds and Waves, the Gen 10 Pokemon, is getting delayed. Or not delayed, but it's not releasing this year, which I think is a good thing. But I want to see the Pokemon Company continue to leverage partners like Koei Tecmo. Koei Tecmo is a phenomenal company, very, very, very talented studios within it. And I want to continue to see good partnerships like that because that is the way that quality output is able to be put out without having a detriment to the content itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it helps that this is just, even if we're not the biggest, uh, we're not going to be super invested in Pocopia, at least off the rip. It's still really interesting, and it's one that I can safely say is a lot better than a certain other spin-off that was given a lot of time, a little bit of time in the presents, which is Pokemon Champions. And Pokemon Champions is a very competitive centric battle game, like really just focused on battles and like the competitive aspect of things and training Pokemon and everything that brings for people who are really into the competitive uh fights of Pokemon. But I'll be honest, and I don't know if this is a hot take, I'm really not into it. Maybe it's because of the premise not really being for me, or maybe it's the visuals just kind of looking like every other regular Pokemon game. But there's something about it that just really hasn't clicked for me. And even though it's free to start, which is good, and I can definitely see a lot of people getting into it because I know that concept really has its fans. I don't know. It's really just like that could come and go for me, and I won't miss it, or I won't feel like, even though it's completely available, I don't even know if I'll want to try it. And I'm curious if it's the same for you. Obviously, you're somehow less interested in Pokemon than I am, but yeah, I'm curious to hear your take on Champions in particular.
I don't even feel like talking about it. I just don't really care. Like, and maybe that's ignorant of me, but like Champions just looks like whatever. It doesn't do anything. It hasn't shown anything to get me really interested in it. I for people that want to play it, that's great. This is coming to mobile too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
mobile and
So like
Switch. Switch first,
Yeah,
but
that's
yes.
right. So like, that's great. I'm glad that there's going to be something for the more like competitive Pokemon players out there, but I'm just not very interested in it. It's not something that really catches my eye per se.
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, really, and this is just broader of like Pokemon as a franchise, we're really interested in the new stuff. Where things where it feels like Pokemon is experimenting with different genres and different ideas and concepts that we don't really see too often. Whereas Champions, it feels like more of the same. Feels like if you took a picture of any Pokemon battle system of the last 5 or so years or more, you will get a game that you will think, oh, this is Champions. Or if you look at Champions to someone out of context, you think, oh, this is Scarlet and Violet. Oh, this is Sword and Shield. There is no real unique identity to its personality. And that's a shame because when I first heard about Champions, I thought this would be a new stadium like game. And Stadium has a very specific personality. Yes, it's a battle simulator, but the animations and the attention to detail is staggering. Even now, people look back at Battle Revolution, which is absolutely the black sheep of that mini franchise, and talk about how detailed the animations are. Um, and there is none of that in Champions. I would have loved to see that level of detail and visual fidelity be put onto Champions, but I understand what they're trying to do with Champions. They want to make it accessible. They want to make it something that is, that anyone who's passing interest is Pokemon competition can get into, hence the mobile release. But it's just, I wish there was more. I wish there was more to it. I wish there was some extra little sauce added to it. And I want to see more of those really creative spin-offs. I want to see Pokemon really emphasize detail and the little things. And to me, this isn't that. Yeah, so I hope it's good. I hope it turns out to be good. I hope people enjoy it. But as far as the Pokemon Presents and everything that was revealed in the Pokemon Presents, that was definitely the low light for me.
Agreed. And there was some stuff here and there of like, oh, Pokemon Cafe Remix, Pokemon Sleep, Pokemon Unite. Like, that's great. I think I will say one of the more interesting announcements that they had was like the game music jukebox thing, where it's like a Game
Yeah,
Boy. I don't know. It was kind of weird. And like, I think it's funny that what was the thought process of having like 45 cartridges and 45 songs? Like, I don't get it at all.
yeah, it's a very specific thing. It's a very specific, weird peripheral. It's a toy. It's not even a peripheral. It's a toy, and it is a jukebox, but it's in the shape of a Game Boy, an old Game Boy, and you put in cartridges to play songs, and the cartridges have like almost a little oh, what's like a viewfinder picture on it that you slide through.
That's
Except
yeah,
here, it's just
that's a good description of it.
yeah, it's just you just slide in the cartridge and there's just a picture of the scene that the song is from. And it's a cool concept, but like who is this for? I don't get this. Like this is such a weird thing. The soundtrack for at least Fire Red and Leaf Green are available on Nintendo Music. Like I can't imagine even the most devout Pokemon fans as kids thinking, "Oh, I want this for a gift." Like this is such a weird niche concept. It's kind of interesting. It's somewhat like I like the idea of it, but it's still just bizarre. And the fact that this was, I think, the first announcement of the Pokemon Presents was just strange. I think I just vividly remember texting a friend like, "What am I even looking at right now?"
Yeah. No, I mean it was just really weird, and in all honesty, I think it's like $70 too. Like it's not
It
cheap.
is,
It's not cheap. And
yeah,
people ran to Nintendo New York to go buy it. I'm sure the same thing happened at San Francisco. That's great. I, it's a fun little collectible, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's not what I had in mind when I thought of, 30th anniversary merchandise for sure. But that's a thing that happened. It was cool. I will say, comment on the good stuff. We did get a update, which we kind of expected this, but it was confirmed that Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness is going to be coming to GameCube Switch Online in March. I think that's a great thing because the GameCube copies are so ridiculously expensive. So great to see that. I was honestly pretty happy. I think we kind of expected that, to be honest, though.
Yeah, it wasn't a surprise. I think it was really only a matter of time before that got added to the service. But you won't hear me complaining. I'm more than happy with more GameCube NSO games in any form that they take. Maybe I'll give it a try for myself one of these days. I've heard very good things about Gale of Darkness over the years. I mean, I've heard great things about all the Pokemon spin-offs in some form or another. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's a good release, and I am I'm happy to see it make the jump to modern platforms. Well, modern platform singular, but still, it's a pretty cool announcement.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's good. I'm hoping that we start to see a little ramp up on the GameCube side of things for NSO, but nonetheless, good to see that moving forward. And of course, we kind of talked about this last week, but it did finally make the jump. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green officially out now. The Game Boy Advance remakes of the original Pokemon games, available for Switch and Switch 2. Really good to see these at $20. I think that's a little much, but again, everyone has their own opinion and what they can justify as a good price for things, which is all good. Nonetheless, it's good to see that they're finally available on the console. I think that's the most important thing of them all. And it was confirmed and, revealed that they do actually feature Pokemon Home integration, which we did talk about last week. Like, if that's not there, that's a huge red flag. I still don't know how I feel about the price point, but I think regardless, it's really good that these are both available on the system. Still wish there was a physical, but that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the price point I go back and forth on, because on the one hand, realistically, most people are just gonna buy one or the other, not both. Like they're just gonna buy either Fire Red or Leaf Green rather than both Fire Red and Leaf Green. And when you think about it in that aspect, $20 isn't the worst ask in the world. It's still a bit much, I think, but it could be worse. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll pick it up for myself personally, but I'm glad that they did confirm the Pokemon Home functionality. I'm glad that's a thing, and I'm happy to see that has been preserved for the modern day, and that more people can get their hands on that game and play it for themselves to really see the best version of where the Pokemon franchise truly began. Because if it was the original Game Boy release, then you and I would be having a very different conversation right now.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. And I think that I think that there's a lot there that's exciting. Potentially Nintendo bringing future, gen releases to the Switch and Switch 2 specifically. I think it'd be really cool. So maybe that opens the door for that, that kind of stuff to happen in the future. All really looking forward to that. But I think obviously the main event, right? The main event that we've been kind of holding off talking about is Pokemon Winds and Waves. The Generation 10 Pokemon games have been confirmed. These were leaked last year in a huge leak, and we kind of already knew the names and such, but we got to look at it, and it was a pretty grand reveal with the big announcement that it's coming in 2027 for Switch 2.
Yeah, I mean, it was massive, right? I watched it, and I'll be honest, as I was watching the Presents live, there is a little brief moment because it starts with I think CG of Pikachu looking through a slideshow of the different generations and regions over the years, and then we see Pikachu greeting a weirdly dressed two other Pikachus, and there's a moment where it cut to black. And for a second, I thought that was it. I was gonna be so mad if that was the end and they just didn't reveal anything else. But thankfully, they showed gameplay, a little bit of gameplay. They showed the in-engine, how it looks. It looks great. I think for the most part, our hopes were kind of confirmed. we know the game looks good. They have actually made attempts to really improve the visual fidelity of the game, and that's great. I'm happy to see that. And I think 2027 is a great call. I'm, as you said earlier, relieved that it's not until 2027 because one, as we'll mention at some point, it opens the door for potentially other things coming out this winter, but also it gives Game Freak more time to really focus on polish and making this game as good as it possibly can be. Because I mentioned it last week, Generation 10 is a huge milestone, and they need to get this right. They really need to push the series forward and take it to new depths and new heights, because otherwise, what are we even doing, right? This needs to be the Pokemon game. If you've somehow gone your entire life without playing a mainline Pokemon generation game, which quite frankly is kind of includes me, this is the one. This is the one that you need to play and get into because this should hopefully be the definitive Pokemon experience if everything goes well.
I hope so, man. I mean, I think overall, I mean, it's just nice to see a Pokemon game that looks like I would expect, you know? This is kind of what I expected with the Switch, so I feel like at least we're finally caught up there, which is great. And it does seem like this is going to be a very big release with a lot of stuff. I will say, in terms of graphics, I do think this is what I expected on the Switch, but I do give a shout out. I think the water looks amazing. So they get plus bonus points for the water. There's too much water, um, you know, but I think that this is a very good step in the right direction. Obviously, we know nothing about it. It's hard to judge based off the trailer that we got, but I am very confident in Game Freak's ability to deliver a game of higher quality now that this isn't coming out in the holiday season. Even 2 months, if it's in January, right? 2 more months is a good thing to help out. I think that that's going to be good and beneficial for, just extra development time. So we'll have to see how things shake out there. But I do think at least the, positivity to the announcement was very clear online. A lot of people are excited, and I think no one has any idea how much of a system seller this is going to be. I mean, seriously.
Oh, this is gonna be the big one. I mean, other than a new Mario and a new Zelda, arguably more so than a new Mario and a new Zelda, this is the big Switch 2 seller. Like, this is going to boost units to an insane degree. And I mean, good on them. I think we don't know really anything about the region. We don't even know what it's called. Presumably, based on a lot of early theories, and I think the leaks from last year as well, this is somewhere Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Philippines adjacent. Which, hey, cool. I think that's a new one. We don't really get a lot of that because it's usually been either America, Europe, or Japan for the most part. The only exception really was, I think the only out there one was Hawaii in Sun and Moon, but even that was really nothing too crazy. Um, so the fact that we're getting a different like region area of the world entirely is great, and I'm more than happy with it. And of course, I think the biggest takeaway that everyone is talking about are the starters. We've revealed who the starters are. We have, as I remember off the top of my head, the Bean Chicken Pokemon Brout, who is a grass starter. We have Pombon, who is a fire starter Pomeranian, I guess, and Gekwa, who, as the name implies, is a water gecko. Of course, the water starter. So I'm sure everyone is wondering the most important question coming out of that presentation of which are our favorite starters. If we do end up picking up the game, which starter would we pick? And Noah, I'd like to start with you because I'm sure you're dying to answer this question.
Oh man, yeah. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of feeling the gecko, the water one.
Gekwa?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling the water one if I had to pick one. I feel like
Yep.
that the like wind one, the little bird is gonna probably have a really cool like final design, but I'm feeling like if I had to pick designs based on these three that I've seen, I'd probably pick the gecko. I do think that the Pomeranian is a fun design. I'd be interested in what the final form of that is. But yeah, I mean, seem pretty good designs. Feels like that these are going to sell a lot of merch, which is always the goal.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, my pick is personally Pombon. You know, I love the design. I like how there are like no thoughts going on in those eyes, just zero brain cells. I mean, as you said, I really want to see the evolutions because that does impact my decision. I know some people, like a lot of my friends, try not to learn anything about the evolutions before playing, which is I think a cool idea, but I could not imagine doing that. I need to know the evolutions. Um, but yeah, so far I'm thinking Pombon. And yeah, I think, as you said, I think these are really good designs. This is the first time in quite a while that I'm like, I think I like all the starter designs. I don't think there's one that I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. I can't even tell you the last time that I think all the starters looked appealing to me. Maybe Gen 6, X and Y. The one that I really think about is Gen 4, Diamond and Pearl with oh gosh, Piplup, Turtwig,
yeah, no, that's the
and
best. In my opinion, those are the
yeah,
best starters that they've ever made. Maybe
yeah,
maybe that's
agreed.
crazy because I know obviously like Bulbasaur, Squirtle, Charmander. That's an iconic
Yep.
group for sure. But that Gen 4 with like I don't know Piplup and Turtwig and stuff. That was like when I really enjoyed Pokemon and I don't know. I think I think that this is a good. I will say I feel like that these starters, at least from my initial impressions, are much more interesting than Gen 9s for sure.
Oh, for sure.
And I also would say probably, yeah, I'd probably say they're more interesting than Gen 8s for me as well. But I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. I couldn't even tell. I think the last really good ones, like not my favorite, but just in general really good ones. I think Alola had some pretty good designs. Um, I remember Alola's pretty well. I I feel like those were very positively received. Um, but yeah, I want to see more of Winds and Waves. I'm curious to see what the gameplay gimmick is. I hope that, as we've talked about before, they really focused on making the story something real. I hope we get voice acting. It's a long time coming, and if there's any place to introduce that, I think this is it. And I want this game to be really good. I want this to be the game where I can finally say, I'm a Pokemon fan. Because there really, especially in the Switch era, there really wasn't anything that made me want to really dive into the series. Because even, because for me, the Pokemon series really shined as for me as a kid was with the anime. And even with the anime, it hasn't really been that interesting lately. Um, so I hope this is it. I hope this is the big one. And I have a good feeling. I'm pretty optimistic, but we'll have to wait and see until the next time they are willing and ready to reveal more information. And who knows when that'll be, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And your comment about Gen 7, definitely, Rowlet and stuff like that was very popular. Litten, those are very popular starters. I do agree with you though, just on a grand scale, this Pokemon has the potential to do so much for the franchise. I mean, it's even hard to describe. People don't understand, right? Like if this Pokemon game comes out, there's a really good story. They change up the like systematic elements of the game, right? And really change up the structure of the gameplay. It's not this, it's not the formula, right? Pokemon is very formulaic. And if they can shake up that formula while still retaining elements of it, I do think, combined with the elevated presentation in gameplay, etc., this could seriously be a genre elevating game for Pokemon solely because there's going to be so many new people on Switch 2 wanting to jump in. I think this could be a game that smashes franchise records if the Game Freak does it right, but we'll have to see. I mean, I will say regardless, if we get nothing, if there's no presentation, no, it's the same kind of formulaic approach, and there's the kind of similar things that we're used to expecting with Pokemon, I will at least give them credits. I do think that the graphical presentation is at par finally, which I appreciate. It is, it is reminiscent of a game that I would expect from Pokemon, at least at bare minimum. So I do hope that there's more beyond that. And I hope that, when we talk about the second trailer of this game in a couple months, and or even later this year, and we can be like, wow, like this looks incredible. I really hope that's what happens. I want this to be an amazing game. I want every game to be an incredible game. I just have some apprehension just based on the past, and this is a new uncharted territory for Pokemon. So we'll have to see how things go there. But overall, I think this was a pretty successful Pokemon Presents. I mean, most Pokemon fans I know were pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it's a testament to how good it was at the main takeaway, because usually with these Pokemon Presents, when they reveal the new generation, there's all sorts of discourse about the starters, which is the best, which is the worst, how the graphics look, that sort of thing. But here, all I have been seeing are memes, fan art, just talking about, like, how cute the starters look, jokes about Brout, who is the grass starter, looking like an angry bird, and other little things like that. And it's been fun. I've enjoyed. It's definitely a positive thing seeing the way that Pokemon fans are finally united. I have not really seen anyone be like, this looks awful. I hate how this looks, which is good. I'm glad. I'm really glad that this is a finally a celebratory time for the franchise and for fans of the series. And I'm excited to see what comes next. I hope we get some news maybe towards the summer. I think would be great, but I don't know. We'll see. But I'm feeling pretty good. I hope this is a sign of things to come, especially with Pocopia's success and how exciting Winds and Waves are. I hope really we get a true Pokemon renaissance, because it really has felt like a long time since we've gotten a high point for the series.
Agreed, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of wraps up Pokemon Presents, but moving forward a little bit to our, next topic, we have an Indie World presentation set for, I guess, March 3rd. And this kind of seems like a presentation I'm not sure what to expect, if we're being honest. It feels like, once again, Nintendo's trying to clear out announcements that it needs to make and prep for that potential big direct that we're all kind of waiting for. I think, you and I definitely agree. The main star of this presentation, in my mind, has to be Mina the Hollower. It's set to come out in spring. We don't have a date for it. This is the place to do it. End off the show with it. But I'm curious, do you have anything else that you have in mind that might show up here you're hoping for?
Not really. I don't really know, because indie worlds always go back and forth. Sometimes you get, really random announcements for games that, you never would have thought would be interesting. Like, God, I don't even know. Sometimes you get an Untitled Goose Game that turns out to be a secret hit, but no one really expected it to be a hit when it was first announced. Sometimes you get a big one. Sometimes I remember when they revealed Cuphead is coming to the Switch, which was a huge deal when it was first announced. Um, so it's something like that. I don't know. Like, I feel like the only other thing I could maybe see are updates on games that were already announced for the console. Maybe a Phasmophobia release date or a content warning release date, little things like that. But other than that, I really don't know. I'm excited. I always really like the indie worlds, even if they're not as thrilling as a partner showcase or main direct. There's always something there for everyone, and I'm excited to see what new indie game grabs me, because I'll be honest, I haven't really grabbed a lot of indie games on my Switch too. There haven't really been any jaw-dropping ones. I'm like, oh, I have to have that. I think Me and the Hollower is the first big one. Obviously, Silk Song, but that's a no-brainer. But I hope we get something cool. I hope there's like, oh, I this is a must-buy for the system, because I think people forget that indies can sometimes create some of the best experiences on any console, but especially the Switch. The Switch really feels like the home for indies, and I'm hopefully we get something really cool and exciting that we don't expect.
Yeah, no, agreed. Man, I think if I had to predict anything beyond just what we know so far, I could see them announcing a port of Mugenics potentially, like one of the biggest indie games of this year so far. I could also potentially see something like, man, there was that game that was revealed last year, I think, and it's Witchbrook. It was that kind of pixel art style, like life sim witch game.
Oh, yeah,
I
is it
would,
like the horror game?
yeah, I don't know that it's horror. I think it's like life sim relationship building kind of game. Um,
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if that makes an appearance here because I don't, at least on the knowledge of my at the top of my head, I don't think we've gotten any update recently. So maybe that could be here. If Mugenics is not the game, another game I think that could make the jump to Switch 2. If there's going to be an indie game that's kind of a big announcement, I could see Peak making the jump. But beyond that, I really don't know. Those are just a couple ideas I have on the top of my head. Maybe, maybe not. None of those happen. I don't know. I think Mina the Hollower is a lock, though. I mean, I think that's the closest thing to a lock that can be. And I guess by the time this podcast is out, you'll know if we were crazy or not.
Yeah, I mean, let us know, so we can look back at ourselves in a few days and go, "What were we thinking about this?" Same goes for Pokemon, by the way. If we turn out to be completely wrong about that and the game turns out to be awful, feel free to clip that part and just send it to us and to mock us about how insane we were. But yeah, I hope it's good. I hope the indie world is good. I'm excited to check it out. I hope there's a game that's like, oh, I need to get this. I have to get this because so far I think there's only really been a few games that released this year on the Switch too, just in general, not even indie, where I that has made me want to pick my console back up again and really dive into it. There is one exception, but we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a fun presentation because even indie worlds, regardless of your interests, there's something there. There is something that you will be like, oh, this is a game that I think will really resonate with me, depending on your interests, your favorite genres, or anything of the sort. You'll find something for you. So I'm looking forward to that for I'm looking forward to it for that at least.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think to cap things off for this episode, we kind of want to just dive into, we talk a lot about third parties here on Switch Point just because that's really been the bulk offering on Switch 2 for this year so far. But, this past weekend, I guess this past week, Resident Evil Requiem released day and date on Switch 2. I've had the chance to play about 20 minutes of it. Saras, I know you played the entire game on it. But I think, just talking about how incredible it is to have a game of this caliber day and date on the system, and considering how amazing the port is, too. I mean, it runs fantastically.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this might be one of my favorite third party releases on the Switch too, and this is coming from someone who adored Cyberpunk 2077 on the console. I played this game from beginning to end on the console and I loved it. I played it all in handheld mode. I did not play it docked at all. And I it was so good. So, just a little bit on the game itself before I talk about just the performance of it, like the Switch 2 version. I loved Resident Evil Requiem. I thought it was a great game. It's I need to think about it a bit. I'm still kind of in that honeymoon phase of all the great parts, focusing on that rather than any issues of it. And but I really enjoyed it. It really felt like a love letter to the series. I thought the Leon sections were great. Obviously, weirdly enough, I think my favorite sections of the game were Grace's. I think her style was really fun. I really liked that grounded horror aspect, and even the Leon stuff was great. I really like the really action oriented stuff. I made a joke to a few friends of mine that Grace is playing Alien Isolation while Leon Kennedy is playing Uncharted, and it
Yeah.
really feels like at some points, where Grace is fighting for her life. I like just stuttering through every word. Her hands are shaking when she holds the gun. If you play in third person, she stumbles all the time, whereas Leon is just doing crazy flips and kicks and wielding chainsaws. It's insane, but I loved it. I There were only a few issues I had here and there, specifically with pacing and the balance between Leon and Grace. Won't go too deep into spoilers. There's a future episode in mind for that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. But as a Switch 2 game, I think really made it shine even more for me. I am, people who know me know I'm a huge horror fan, whether it's, movies, TV shows, or games. And I've been really wanting a good horror game experience on Switch 2. I played Chronos: The New Dawn on Switch 2. I did not enjoy Chronos at all. I know I feel that feels weird to say because I know that game has a lot of its fans, but that was really not the experience for me. I hope we get more like I hope we get some Silent Hill games on the system at a later point, which we'll talk about too. But Resident Evil Requiem was the thing I was searching for. It sometimes, um, I played it mostly at night with my TV on in the background, and there were a few moments where I'm like, man, I wonder if this would be scarier on the PS5. But then there were other moments where I jumped and like screamed at the screen of like certain things happening. Um, there's one particularly mean jump scare in the beginning. No, that I think you're familiar with is there's a moment where you open a door in the first area of the game and a zombie just falls out, and I jumped at that completely. I won't lie. That startled me so bad, and yeah, I really enjoyed playing it on handheld. The controls feel great. All feels very satisfying. I may as well have been playing it on a PS5 with in regards to the controls, and the same goes for the visuals, which of course is the most important thing. Um, there are a little bit of visual kind of iffiness. I don't know what the professional term for that is. Obviously, the hair. Some like I think a lot of DLSS games suffer from like weird stuff with the hair and rendering hair. It looks kind of pixelated in spots, but overall the game ran great. It's very consistent frame rate. Looks beautiful. Even some of the later areas, the open areas look fantastic, and the cutscenes especially look great. I mean, I got some pictures that I took that I've sent to my friends, and sometimes they're not even able to tell what console this is on, which is how you know it's something truly special. So if you have a Switch 2 and you want like really want Resident Evil Requiem, I think the Switch 2, if you want to buy this game entirely on Switch 2, I think you'll have a great time. If you don't care as much about graphics and making certain areas and characters look as beautiful as possible. I know a lot of people really want Leon to be rendered in high quality 4K graphics on their giant TV or whatever. And if you're more into that, then obviously PS5 or PC is the better option for you. But if you're willing to trade on graphics just for portability, Switch 2 is the way to go. And that feels weird to say, because that I think has been the magic of third-party games on the console, and that it feels like an equal option to other consoles. You're not trading anything. There are very few compromises you have to make. And in some ways, I have had more fun with games on Switch 2 than I have on console.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I'm curious actually. Like, I know you spoke a little bit about it kind of being, you know, you can play Resident Evil Requiem on the Switch 2 and get as good of an experience as other platforms, but I'm curious for you to kind of like dive into that. Like, how was the performance? I know you mentioned a few things like the hair, like how were the visuals, playing on handheld? Did you get a good feel for the controls? How did it feel? That kind of thing. I'm just curious because this is one of the biggest third party, I'd honestly argue this is the biggest third party release thus far for the Switch 2.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, the fact that we got Resident Evil on Switch 2 is one thing. But the fact that it released simultaneously on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PC, and Switch 2 is massive and very promising. And in terms of performance, I think it looked great. I think there were a few areas where the frames kind of stuttered a little bit and dropped, particularly in the first area of the game, and obviously in the second big city area, which if you've played, you know the city area that I'm referring to. A lot of this stuff with Leon, obviously, because he's full action hero and fights sometimes waves of enemies. There's a lot of like there's a few parts where there's like fire physics and particles, where it sort of starts to chug a little bit. Early on in the game, there's a segment, it was shown in the trailer, where you're sniping as Leon, and this was a part where it kind of fought to stay stable, as the fires rage and things like that. But these instances were few and far between. The graphics themselves, other than the hair, looked great. I think, again, a lot of shots looked comparable to the PlayStation 5, specifically in the cutscenes. Um, I think Leon looks really well realized. I think sometimes specifically on handheld, I don't know how applicable this is on docked. My TV that I'm with in the place that I'm staying at right now really isn't good. So, quite frankly, the handheld version is probably the best it's going to look in any format for me right now. Um, but I think Leon's beard looked kind of like very blurry, if that makes any sense, like very pixelated. Like sometimes you could barely see the beard there at all. Um, but yeah, I think it looked great overall. I think these instances were very negligible. I stopped noticing them after a while, and in general, like certain areas just looked fantastic. There is a massive, insane action scene that happens a little bit halfway through the game, and I adored it on this system. And having that, like, look how good it did, where you get a big view of the city, is just insane. And the fact that the Switch 2 can pull this off is incredible. And in terms of controls, again, it felt great. There weren't really any crazy gimmicks. Cyberpunk had mouse controls. I don't believe this did, nor did I want it to. Um, Kind of a hot take. I haven't really used mouse controls much for anything, just because of my setup. I mostly just play entirely on handheld. Um, but I like just like holding it in my hands felt great, and all the controls felt satisfying. And there was a moment where I was just like, this is the first game in a very long time that I wanted to play with headphones. Because I usually just play through my speakers, and this time, I have a pretty nice set of headphones, so I plugged in my wire, and oh my gosh, I was lost in that world for hours. I think I just binged 5 or so hours of the game, like the first part, just all in one sitting because of how invested I was. And I beat the game pretty quickly. Obviously, it's a running joke between my friends and I that I beat games really quickly. Um, but here I felt like I wanted to power through and just like beat it all the way through because of how good the game is, but also just how great it felt on the Switch too. And maybe at a later point, once I have a better TV that looks nicer, maybe I'll consider, if it's on sale, getting it on PS5. But if this is the only way I play it for the rest of my life, and I, have to cost a little bit of visual fidelity to have that handheld factor, I'll take it. Because the fact that I can play it anywhere, anytime, no matter where I am in the world, is an absolute win. And I am so excited to go back and play this game for multiple playthroughs. I wish, I wish that there were some form of achievements Nintendo had. Um, Resident Evil has, built-in little challenges that you can do that are also tied to achievements on other consoles. Here, it just gives you points to spend on certain things, specifically in the post game. But I wish there were achievements. But other than that, no notes. I think as a game, I would probably give it a 9 out of 10. But as a Switch 2 experience, might be my favorite on the console when it comes to third party. It's up there with Cyberpunk. And I'd probably give it a 9.5 just as a Switch 2 game.
That's great to hear, dude. Thank you for diving in. That helps me. I've basically only played bits of the prologue because I've been playing on PS5 all weekend. So it's really great that we have such a great port, and I feel like that speaks so strongly to the future with third parties. This is a console that's going to be here for another 7 years at least, and I have to say I feel pretty confident right now that this is going to be well supported for the next 7 years. I know DLSS did a lot in Resident Evil Requiem for the Switch 2. And, as more developers get their hands on that technology and as optimization continues, I think that will only get better over time. I'm very excited. The fact I picked up the Generation Collection physical. I know keycart's shocking. I know I was not happy about it, but it is what it is. But it was, $90, so you basically pay $20 extra and you get RE7 and RE8. So I'm very excited to dive into those. I've heard they're really, really good on Switch 2. And it's just nice to have these games on the console. Yes, they are re-releases. In the case of Requiem, it's a brand new game, but it's not, an exclusive, quote unquote. I mean, they're new games on the system and they're portable and they run great. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm really excited for that. I know this has been a really strong start to the year for Switch 2. In terms of third party support, right? We had Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade in January, which was an exceptional port. We had Resident Evil Requiem in February. And March, we've got some games coming up. And I know in April, we've got Pragmata that's coming from Capcom. But I'm really excited for just seeing what's next. I know like Rebirth in June is going to be a big test for the console, being a major 2024 RPG. So it'll be interesting to see what these games continue to look like. But I feel like as a Switch fan, you have to feel pretty good about the console and its third party capabilities right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of my favorite experiences on the console so far have been third party. Obviously, I've talked about Cyberpunk at length, but even last year, towards the end, I was playing a lot of Hitman, World of Assassination on the system, and it's great. Had, I think I got because it's a collection of Hitman 1, 2, and 3. So I think I got up until like the middle of Hitman 2 when I had it on PlayStation 5, and I also got it on my Steam Deck. But it took the Switch 2 version to finally make me go all the way and beat it, finally. And I loved it, and it runs great, looks great. Thankfully, considering Agent 47 is bald, you don't have to worry about hair there. Um, but yeah, it gives me a lot of hope for the future, and it really has made me wonder about upcoming games. And after Requiem, there are certain games coming out this year that a part of me wants to just buy on Switch 2 rather than on other consoles. One example of that, as we've already mentioned, is Pragmata. I might get Pragmata on Switch 2. That might be the way I play it. And I think I'd have a great experience, especially after Requiem. Capcom clearly understands the system, its limitations, what it's capable of putting out on there, and that gives me a lot of hope. Same for 007 First Light. I'm very excited to see that game, and I'm excited to see how it runs on the system. And if they can do anything close to what they did with Hitman, I think that's really promising. And yeah, just obviously Rebirth is a big one, and there are so many great third party games on the horizon that have released and have yet to release, and some that we may want to see released. And I want to ask, I think for me, so far, I think my favorite third party experience on the console, it's a tie between Cyberpunk and Resident Evil Requiem. Cyberpunk, I've put a lot of hours in on the Switch too. I have two save files with two different characters going on. I haven't beaten both because I've already beaten the game like a dozen times. I can wait and just finish all the side quests on my own time. And Requiem, I already beat. And I'm excited to go back and play both. And I'm curious for you, what are your favorite third party experiences on a console? Obviously, one of them is Remake, but I'm curious to hear the others.
Yeah, man, it's tough. I there's a lot there that I've been able to enjoy on the Switch too. I'm actually gonna be probably diving back into the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection before MGS Volume 2, because there were updates for the Switch 2 version finally running at 60 FPS, which is awesome. I can say I think that besides the obvious things that RGG Studios has been doing recently, I think that the Yakuza ports for Switch 2 have been really high quality. I also enjoyed Street Fighter 6, and I haven't played a ton of third party. Those are kind of my main ones. I played Persona 3 Reload, and that was a very bad port. Atlas fixed it later on. It's still not as good as any other port, and I wish it had 60 FPS in handheld, but it is what it is. But I will say, when we talk about Requiem, we talk about third party games, there's a lot of talk online that maybe these games aren't getting supported or bought. I saw a really misleading stat about, Requiem sales on Switch 2 earlier today. But I want to call out, take a look at the eShop. Pokopia is number one on the eShop right now. That makes a lot of sense. It's a Pokemon game. It's coming out this week. Number two is the $90 bundle for Resident Evil 7, 8, 9. Then number three is Resident Evil Requiem at its $70 version. And number nine is the $80 version of Requiem, the deluxe edition. So Requiem is sitting in, occupying three of the top 10 slots on Switch 2 on the eShop. That is very, very good. And that is what we want to see. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade was at number one for over a week on the Switch 2 eShop. If this stuff continues for third parties, I think companies are going to continue to really just put more and more effort onto bringing stuff to Switch 2, because the fans are supporting it. Fallout 4 Anniversary came out last week. That is number 5 in the eShop. $60 game. I mean, it is what it is, and that port's also apparently really good. I want to get my hands on it at some point. Really mad the fact that it's a code in box. Don't understand the point of that. But Bethesda's going to add in with an update DLSS support. There's a 30 FPS, a 40 FPS, and a 60 FPS mode. And it feels like a lot of developers are really getting to start to experiment with how powerful and how different the games can run on the system, right? Capcom opted for the unlocked frame rate for Requiem, where it just kind of runs at 60. There's some dips, but it's unlocked. I think that that's great. I would have been interested to see a 40 FPS mode that maybe targets a higher resolution and has no frame rate drops. But even then, the frame rate drops, from what I've seen online and from what I've heard from the people I've talked to, are really not that big of an issue. And they're very limited for the most part. But I mean, it's just really exciting, man. It really does feel like that there is true parity at this point. And if you're willing to say, okay, I'm not going to play this game in 4K with the best textures on the market, but it's going to look dang good and it's more than enough to play on the Switch 2, I mean, that's all I can ask for as a fan in any game.
Absolutely, and with the success, it makes me really excited for other games coming out. I'm excited to play Fallout 4, as you said, but also Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and Oblivion when that comes out, and also, I'm almost like fairly confident that with how well 7, 8, 9 have been doing on the console, it's only a matter of time before we get 2, 3, and 4 on the Switch 2 as well. I think it's more a matter of when, not if. But I want to take these last few moments to really talk about, we've talked at length about games we know are coming and games we think are coming that are third party support. I want to talk a bit about games we want, hopes that we want of games that maybe are a little outlandish, like our list
We've
of.
talked about this, Saras. Come on.
No, we can always revisit it. I think our list has changed. I think for me, my list has changed a little bit. We talked about it way back when it was first announced, but I think our expectations of the console have changed, and I think the sky is now the limit where any game is reasonably possible. Because back then we were thinking about older titles, maybe some smaller remasters and the like, but now we're looking and games can be released same day, and anything is possible at this point. I don't think it means that we're going to get GTA 6, for instance, on the Switch 2 at day one. That would be insane. But I think a Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, is more than likely. And with how well Red Dead Redemption 1 did, I played a little bit of the Switch 2 version. It runs amazingly well. It looks amazing on the system. I think our ideas and understanding of what is possible on this console has definitely changed and shifted.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to our episodes, the 2 episodes we had about the partner showcase where we talked a lot about third parties. I want to see the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. I want to see Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill F, and then the Resident Evil 2, 3, 4 trilogy. Beyond that, I would expect that most games that come out nowadays are going to be on the system. I think Microsoft has shown that it's putting as much as it can on there. I'd want to see Ninja Gaiden 4, maybe a complete edition, stuff like that. But it'll be interesting. I think that you're right in the sense that now it really does feel like future third-party games. We should be expecting Switch 2 to show up at this point, which is exciting. But I mean, it does feel like the sky's the limit. So we'll have to see and wait and see what else is in store for the rest of this year. But that's going to do it, everyone, for this episode of Switch Point. Thank you so much for tuning in. And please be sure to let us know your thoughts on the Pokemon Presents presentation below. And if you've been meaning to check out Resident Evil Requiem on the Switch 2, be sure to let us know your thoughts on that as well. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.